Sometimes negativity and anger can become our biggest distractions. It's like no matter what we do to try to fight them, we cannot win. Sometimes it can feel like a fight with both hands tied behind our back. I know that in my life, it could be the simplest things. I might be with friends or family, and somebody says something slick or something that I don't like, and now I'm just all in a tizzy. I'm all inside my head, all inside my feelings, because I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this. Do I let it slide? Do I say something back? X, Y, and Z. And it's so difficult, especially when you want to be righteous, especially when you want to be peaceful, especially when you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but you have this internal conflict like, I can't let that slide. I can't let it go. There's also situations where, sometimes we might be around individuals who they gossip a lot, or they talk trash about other people or about us. And we find ourselves in a situation where we begin to feel distrusting. We might start feeling very, very uncomfortable. And it's like, man, I know if they'll talk about them that way, they'll probably talk about me this way. And it's just so uncomfortable, so conflicting. It's like, how do I even move forward in this environment when I know there's no love? You know what I mean? And then there's also situations where we might even talk negatively about ourselves, and we might talk harshly to ourselves. We might be angry inside with ourselves. I wish I would have did this better. I wish I would have did that better. I wish I could have overcame this situation by now. I wish I was in this place or that place. And we get ourselves to a place where we're feeling so bad about who we are, and we're so angry with ourselves that we can't see all the good we do. We can't see all the accomplishments that we have had and that we have made, and all the things that God has blessed us with. I know in my personal life, two things that I'm very insecure about, that I've worked on a lot and continue to work on, is number one, my ability to relate to others. Since I started walking with Christ seriously and my priorities shifted as a result, I sometimes feel as though most individuals will not want to have that type of close relationship with me. I love everything, or a lot of things, just like other individuals. I love music. I love spending time and food and all that type of stuff. But it's always, I think, when it gets to a point where it begins to conflict with my values and the way that I'm trying to walk. Case in point, I love connecting with people over music type stuff, and I love connecting with people over just the creation of music and all of that. But when the subject matter start getting into things that disagree with my walk with Christ, it's very, very difficult for me to lean in. Case in point, I'm not trying to listen to no music about degrading women. I have a beautiful wife and a beautiful daughter. That's not what I'm trying to hear. I don't want to hear music about the streets and hear music about sliding back and forth and about taking lives and committing different crimes and stuff. I've heard enough of that. I've seen enough of that. You know what I mean? And there's nothing good that ever comes from that. And so why would I want to put that into my spirit? And why would I want to connect with somebody else over hearing somebody else talk about things that I don't want to be a part of or even be associated with at the stage of life that I'm in now? And so I get insecure about that sometimes, and I've talked to God about it, and I continue to talk to God about it. I continue to work on it, because the fact of the matter is, just like you probably watching this right now, you would like to live a righteous life the same way I probably would like to live a righteous life. So why do sometimes I count myself out in that way? I don't know, but that's just something. I also get very insecure about my singing. I used to love to sing. I used to sing every single last day, every single second that I could. I used to make songs, all of that. But when I stopped, for whatever reason, it's been so difficult to get that confidence or that ability back that I had. And I get down on myself about that sometimes. But nonetheless, this is to make the point that just like you, we all have insecurities. We all have situations where anger and negativity, whether it came from outside, somebody else saying or doing something, or whether it came from internal and us inflicting it upon ourselves, sometimes anger and negativity can become such big distractions that it feels almost impossible to move forward. It feels almost impossible to plan for the future. It feels impossible to do anything worth doing. It feels impossible even to include God in our path. You know what I'm saying? It feels impossible to apply the scriptures to our life. But that is why today on the Larger Than Logic podcast, I'm going to be sharing with you three biblical truths that will help you navigate and move through life with anger, with negativity, in a way better manner. It's going to allow us to be able to release some of that. And even if we can't release it, know what to do with it. And so today, on the Larger Than Logic podcast, let's go ahead and let's get into it. First truth that we must take accountability for is that the strongest believers have more control over themselves and their emotions than anyone else. I'm going to say that one more time. The strongest believers, the strongest disciples, they have more control over themselves and their emotions than anyone else. This truth comes from Proverbs chapter 16 at verse 32 that reads, "One who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and one who rules his spirit than one who captures a city." This truth right here is so important because it sheds light on a very, very important fallacy in our minds. Have you ever noticed that in most circles, people think that the individual who is physically the strongest is the one who is the most dominant or the most mighty or the most respected? A lot of times we think that the person who is the biggest and the most burly, or the individual who's the most quote unquote dangerous, is the one who has the most respect. And the fact of the matter is that could not be further from the truth. A lot of times you could be a big guy. A lot of times you could be a big stepper, as they say. You can be an individual who is able to cause intimidation in others. You might be an individual who can inflict pain or harm on others. But a lot of times that individual, though they may be feared, they may not necessarily be respected. And a lot of times, I know you've all heard it, and it's the honest truth, there's always someone who is bigger and badder. And so they may be a big fish in this pond, but they are a little fish in this ocean or this lake over here. And so a lot of times we fall into this, and we'll even begin to want to be that. We'll begin to think that if I can get bigger, if I can get stronger, if I can fight better, if I can fight harder, if I can get bigger guns or better guns, or I can get better with guns, I can be this person or that person and this. Just think you can go back and forth, tit for tat with everybody. But this is the crazy thing. A lot of times the individual that is the most quiet, a lot of times the individual who is the most reserved, a lot of times the individual who is the most to themselves is the individual who often has the most respect. It is the individual who is so unbothered that the whole room could be on fire and they are chilling. This is crazy to think, but if you ever noticed when you were in school, at work, I don't know where you work, I don't know where you went to school, but it has always been the case, the individual who is about their business, the individual who is to themselves, the individual who is not letting everything that's going on around them affect them or intrude on their inner peace, on what they got going on, they are the ones who are often the most respected. They are the ones that are usually the most unbothered. That is by no mistake, and that is not just a happenstance. The fact of the matter is this: the individual who has the highest amount of self-control will always be the strongest. The individual who has the most self-control will always be the best. Because at that point, their outcomes and what they do and what they say is no longer contingent on anybody. It is solely on contingent on what they decide. And so on today, what I'd like to encourage you is this: you may be angry right now. I deal with anger also. You may be frustrated right now. You may be in a heap of negativity right now. I've dealt with those things, and I even go through seasons where I still deal with those things. But one thing that we cannot forget and that we cannot lay to the side is this: the only thing that we have in the physical to combat these things is our self-control. And we have a choice on whether we want to release that self-control to everybody else and everything else, or if we want to hold fast to the only thing that we really can control, and that is ourselves. And so on today, let us understand that the best believers and the strongest believers are the ones who do not lend or leave their self-control to anybody else. They are the individuals who have the most control over themselves and their emotions, and nobody else can touch those buttons. And so on today, let's intention that in our heart. Let's become individuals who are so unbothered that it is strange. Let's become individuals who are so unbothered with the craziness of the world, with the craziness that people say and things that people do and the things that happen around us, especially the situations that we cannot control, so much so to the point where it is impossible for anything but peace to fall into our path. Truth number 2. Peace with people and God will always be greater than vengeance. Peace with people and God will always be greater than vengeance. Oh my goodness, this couldn't be more true. Of course it's true because it is given to us by God, but I've lived this and I have seen this. Sometimes we think that the peace that is for us. Sometimes we think that the peace that God means for us is on the other end of us getting our get back. Sometimes we think that the peace that is for us is on the other end of us going tit for tat and having the last tit or having the last tat. And the fact of the matter is that could not be further from the truth. This one comes from Romans chapter 12, verses 17 to 21. It reads, "Never repay evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all people. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all people. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing so, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." That is Romans chapter 12, verses 17 through 21. And the crazy thing is, man, I have lived this, y'all. I have lived this. There was a season of my life when I would go to sleep thinking about the negativity that I'd have to face the next day. I would go to sleep planning on how I would go tit for tat with this person or go back and forth with these guys or X, Y, and Z. My life was consumed with vengeance. My life was consumed with not having somebody get the one up on me. My life was consumed with defensiveness. And it was crazy. I developed insomnia because I was ruminating so much about vengeance, and I was so consumed with anger. I was so consumed with pride. I was so consumed with fear that I could not find it within myself to choose or have any type of peace. And it was crazy. But the thing is, when I realized that it wasn't my fight and I was actually making things worse, is when I was actually able to give it to God. When I realized that vengeance and revenge is like a game of ping pong, is when I was able to put it down. I realized that as long as I continue to hit the ball of revenge back at the other person or other people, it's going to come back, and we're going to keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and the game will never end until somebody puts down the paddle. The game will never end until somebody says, I'm not playing anymore. And it's kind of crazy because unlike the actual game, the individual who often wins is the one who walks away from the table. It's oftentimes the one who stays at the table that becomes the loser. Why is this? Because just like in the physical sense, imagine one person staying at that table, waiting for the ball to come back. They continue to hit the ball and hit the ball and hit the ball while the other person is at work, while the other person is spending time with their family, while the other person is on vacations, while the other person is moving forward in life and continuing to build and continuing to grow. Like, really imagine that. This other person is at work. They are paying their bills and you're sitting there in front of a ping pong table. You're waiting for them to come back to the table to continue to play this game. All the while they're living their lives. Who's the loser in that situation? And it's crazy because I realize this is how I look when I'm sitting here waiting to continue to play the game of revenge with somebody. There's no way that I could ever win in that scenario. And then number two, there's no way that God can really work in that situation. That's another really, really big thing. It's one of those situations where it's like, okay, if I really want to be righteous, if I really want God to be able to work in my life, if I really want God to be able to work through me, how is it possible for me to do things the way He would want me to do them, and then also do this thing of just going back and forth with somebody? It's really impossible to be in two places at once, the exact same way that it is impossible for me to be at work and be playing ping pong at the same time unless I'm a professional ping pong player. It just does not work that way. And so on today, let us not play ping pong of revenge and vengeance with people. Let's not go back and forth and try to go tit for tat. And let's not play this game, understanding that there's no way that we could ever win, and there's no way that God can get the glory out of that situation. On today, I would like to encourage us to choose peace over vengeance. All right. Truth number 3. All right. It says, no form of righteousness can come from anger, but humility opens you to every good thing from God and others. I'm going to say that one more time. No form of righteousness can come from anger, but humility opens you to every good thing from God and others. And this is just a fact. Like, I want to ask you a question. Think about the time when you were most angry in your life, or even a time recently. Think about a time you were just angry, upset recently about anything at all. And I want to ask you this. When you were that angry, did the thought pass your mind, who can I help right now? And how can I demonstrate the most love to them right now? Whose life can I add value to right now in a way that they have never experienced before? Who can I show the love of God to, and how can I do that? Did any of those thoughts cross your mind when you were angry? Did any of those thoughts cross your mind when you were sitting there ruminating about what somebody said or what somebody did? I know for a fact they didn't, because when we are angry, all we see is red. When we are angry, we are so frustrated that it's impossible for honestly any good thing to come past our mind. Maybe somebody might come to us in public and ask for something or need something, and we're willing to help. But within our own body, within our own faculty, within our own mind, when we are angry, there's no form of righteousness that can come from that. In James chapter 1, verses 19 to 21, it says, you know this, my beloved brothers and sisters. Now everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For a man's anger does not bring about the righteousness of God. Therefore, ridding yourselves of all filthiness and all that remains of wickedness, and humility receive the word implanted, which is able to save your souls. Man, check this out. I used to sit in anger. And I sat in anger like it was paying me. Even after I said, Christ, I want to live life your way. Christ, I believe and I trust your way and your plan. I still had more trust in my anger and in my emotions than the will of God taking place. And that was not a good thing. I'm not saying that like it's cool. I'm not saying like that's what anybody else should do. I'm just saying like that's where I was. And it happens sometimes. Yes, it is a choice, but that's where I was. And you may be right there right now. But the crazy thing is that while I was sitting with that anger, while I was sitting in that season, while I was sitting in that space, God showed me that it was impossible for him to be able to sit in the same space with me while my anger dwelled there. God showed me that it was almost impossible for not even almost, because when I was in that season, bro, God was showing me that the place where anger was sitting in my heart, it was meant for him. And so if God was going to indwell me, if God was going to sit with me, if God was going to help me be more like him, if God was going to help me in my relationships, if God was going to help me in my personal development, if God was going to help me in becoming who I'm actually supposed to be, it is impossible for anger and for him to sit in that space at the exact same time. It is impossible. It's like you have to choose. You got to choose, okay, do I want to sit here and be angry? Do I want to have revenge on my mind? Or do I want to have bloodshed on my mind? Do I want to have violence on my mind? Do I want to have arguing and going back and forth on my mind? Or do I want to have love on my mind? Do I want to have peace on my mind? Do I want to have service on my mind? Do I want to have helping somebody else experience the love of God for themselves on my mind? Because they cannot sit in the same space. And so when I learned that, when God showed me that, is when I began to intention myself to release that anger, when I began to allow God to try to help me release that anger. And it's crazy because trying to do it by myself would not have worked, because all I would have ended up doing is self-medicating, trying to distract myself, trying to think a good thought that wasn't rooted in anything solid, to try to distance myself from this anger rather than taking God's perspective, understanding that we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, understanding that life is but a vapor and we do not own it, understanding that anything that I'm feeling prideful over, anything that I'm feeling possessive over, anything that I'm feeling as though it's mine and I must defend, anything that I'm feeling was done wrong to me, I do not own anything. I'm a filthy rag in the eyes of God, but I was precious enough to be redeemed. And there's nothing that anybody has or will do to me that I have not done to somebody else in some way, form, or fashion, physically or in the spirit. Understanding these things puts you in a place where it's almost impossible to not humble yourself and realize, yo, I don't care what it was, I gotta let that mess slide. I don't care what it was, man. I don't want to be in this conflict, because I cannot be in conflict, and I cannot be angry, and I cannot be this frustrated and be dwelling with God at the same point in time. It's easier said than done. Trust me, I know. I've experienced it. Especially, man, I be trying to tell folk there's certain buttons of mine that no matter who pushes it, once that button gets pushed, it feels like it has to be up and it has to be stuck. Now, I didn't say it's up and stuck because I'm trying to alleviate that from my body. I'm trying to move away from that, and God is helping me. But there's certain buttons that get pushed, and you see a different side of me than what you see on Larger Than Logic. But that's not where I want to be, and that's not where I'm gonna be. And God has been doing the work in me and bringing me further and further and further and further and further away from that. And I'm just so thankful, and I'm so grateful, because when it comes to the example that I set for my wife, when it comes to the example that I set for my daughter, I don't want anybody to get the idea that a follower of Christ, that a disciple, uses excuses to be able to do things that they're not supposed to do, especially when it comes to being violent, especially when it comes to being angry, especially when it comes with when it comes to how we treat other people. It is so important, because that's how we actually show we know God, how we treat other people, by treating them with love. And so I'm saying all this to say it is not easy. It is not something that just comes at the drop of a hat, but it is possible with God. I'm a testament to that. I'm nowhere even close, remotely close to the person that I was, and how I used to deal with anger, how I used to deal with conflict, how I used to deal with disagreement, how I used to deal with negativity. And so on today, what I want to encourage you with is that understanding that there's really no form of righteousness that can ever come out of sitting there and being angry. But if you are able to humble yourself, if you are able to realize the good and bad of who you are, who God created you to be, if you are able to sit there and understand that no matter what you're angry about, it really, really is not that important in the grand scheme of things. If you can realize that what you're angry about is more than likely a lie that you have decided to believe, a perspective that does not work in your favor and that did not come from God, that is eating you alive, it's almost like lifting a feather up. That's how easy it is to humble yourself and realize that when you humble yourself, you are now open. When you humble yourself, you are now saying, God, you can place the next thing in my hand. Got a question for you. If you when you're walking down the street or you're driving around, when you see somebody that's angry, do you walk closer to them or do you move away? When somebody's even on the side of the road begging and they want money or whatever they want type stuff, if they look angry or intimidating, does that make you want to roll your window down faster? Or does that make you want to act like you don't see them so that they don't turn up on you? I'm just saying, because a lot of times we get this mindset that thinking that we can walk through life angry and still get the blessings that God has for us. Sometimes we get this mindset that we can be consumed by anger and still somehow be a disciple. We can be consumed by anger and somehow still work for God the way He intended. We can be consumed by a spirit of anger and also be consumed by the Holy Spirit, and it's just impossible. And so on today, I would like to encourage you to put anger away. Intention yourself to put anger away. Don't let anger consume you, but humble yourself. Understand that you are just as guilty as anybody that you would want to accuse. Understand that God cannot use you in that state and put it all for you, and allow yourself to be humbled. Humble yourself and allow God to take the steering wheel. Allow God to work in the situation. Allow God to show you the steps forward. And most importantly, let His Spirit indwell you. Let the peace come, bro. Because the thing is, you can't have peace and anger at the same time too. While we sitting here ruminating, huffing and puffing, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, you're not at peace. And everybody around you can see it, even if you can't. But look, man, y'all know I be on this thing and I will rap all day long. One more time, we're going to go through these truths. The first truth that you must understand that will help you with this: the strongest believers have more control over themselves and their emotions than any other person. Truth number 2, peace with people and God will always be greater than vengeance. Don't play ping pong with people. Don't try to go tit for tat, because you will lose. The individual who wins every time is the one who walks away from the table. The loser is going to sit there and die at that table while the other person then took their trips, got their money, put their kids through school, lived a beautiful life, while that other person is sitting there at the ping pong table looking real smart. Okay? And then truth number 3, no form of righteousness can come from anger, but humility opens you to every good thing from God and others. Okay? But as you all know, my name is Avery Taylor. You are tuned into the Larger Than Logic podcast, and I'm so glad you've allowed me to be a part of your journey.